Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe because she didn't fit the image they'd built in their heads, the image of what a soldier should look like. The dust of fob razorback tasted of rust and regret. It got into everything, the cracks of lips, the creases of uniforms, even the coffee that was never hot enough. The air shimmered with heat and exhaustion, and every breath felt like inhaling powdered rust. But to Sergeant Anna Sharma, it was just another constant, one more discomfort in a life already built on endurance. She moved through the swirling haze of the supply depot like a ghost, quiet, deliberate, unnoticed. Her boots crunched on gravel as forklifts beeped somewhere in the distance, and men shouted over each other about crates, manifests, and fuel shortages. It was chaos, a kind she understood, a kind she could tame. 2 weeks. That's how long she'd been here. Long enough to know every corner of the depot by memory, every face by its expression, the smirk of the young infantrymen, the bored eyes of the clerks, the weary nods of mechanics who'd seen too much sun. They called her the box lady. Not to her face, of course. Soldiers rarely wasted courage on honesty when mockery was easier. She didn't mind. They could call her whatever they wanted. She'd been called far worse. To Alpha Company she was background noise, a logistics NCO, mid-30s, quiet, with the faint tiredness of someone who's seen too much of the world to be impressed by it anymore. She wasn't one of them, not a rifle-toting grunt with stories of firefights and near misses. She didn't swagger, didn't drink with the boys, didn't even laugh at their jokes. She just worked methodically, endlessly, cataloging, stacking, labeling, moving. They never saw the calculation in her eyes. They never saw the way she studied the perimeter wire when she walked to breakfast, not with fear, but with analysis. The way her gaze lingered on guard rotations, or the distances between HESCO barriers, or the blind spots near the communications tower. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit, the kind that doesn't die even after years of pretending you've moved on. But the men didn't see any of that. They saw only quiet, and quiet in a place like this was weakness. Especially to Corporal Jake Evans, the self-appointed alpha of the base's young bloods. 20-something, sharp jawline, the kind of man who thought he'd already seen it all after one deployment. He led his two shadows, Miller and Chun, boys still playing soldiers, full of restless energy and hollow confidence. To them, Sergeant Sharma was a target. Not for hate, just for sport. It started small. A missing form here, a misplaced pallet there. A battery shipment lost only to be found hours later under a crate of MREs. They called it initiating the newbie, though she'd been in uniform longer than any of them had been out of high school. "Wonder if the sergeant can even lift one of these ammo cans," Miller said once, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "Probably break a nail," Chun added, earning laughter that came too easily. She heard them, every word. She always did. But she never reacted. She simply picked up the misplaced form, restacked the pallet, and went back to work, her movements quiet, deliberate, almost serene. Her silence was infuriating. Because when you mock someone, you want a reaction. You want proof you exist in their world. And she gave them nothing. They mistook her restraint for fear. They mistook her stillness for submission. What they didn't understand was that stillness is often the first language of predators, the kind who wait, measure, and act only when it matters. By the end of the week, the depot looked different. What used to be a chaotic sprawl of boxes and barrels was now an ordered grid of precision, ammo sorted by caliber, rations rotated by expiry, medical kits labeled with luminous paint for quick access at night. She'd even optimized the forklift routes. It wasn't just neatness. It was strategy. A quiet architecture of survival. But to the infantrymen it looked like a woman tidying shelves. They couldn't see the invisible structure holding their world together, how every bullet they chambered, every bandage they wrapped, passed through her hands. They never noticed, because they had never known what it was like not to have those things. And that's the paradox of war. The ones who make it run are the ones no one sees. That night, under the dull hum of the generator, Anna sat alone at her desk. The depot was quiet, only the whisper of wind against canvas walls and the occasional clang of a loose chain swaying. Her laptop cast a pale glow across her face as she updated manifests and cross-checked requisitions. Her movements were exact, mechanical, but her eyes were tired not from the work, but from something deeper. Outside, three silhouettes watched her from the shadows of the mess tent, Evans and his boys, their laughter sharp and juvenile against the night air. "Look at her," Evans muttered, "probably organizing her spice rack." Chun snickered. "She never talks, creeps me out." "She's got nothing to say," Evans said flatly. "Pushes paper, we're the tip of the spear." Then he grinned, a cruel, boyish thing. Time someone reminded her of the difference. The idea took root, ugly, stupid, but satisfying. A prank, they said, just to see her flustered, just to make her feel something. When the camp lights dimmed to amber and most of the base slipped into uneasy sleep, Evans moved. He knew how to stay quiet. He'd done it on patrols, sneaking through doorways in Afghan villages where shadows carried teeth. But this wasn't that. This was different, easier. He slipped through the flap of the female quarters like a thief. His pulse raced, adrenaline, excitement, something darker. Inside, the air was heavy with heat and silence. Anna slept soundly, one arm draped over the thin blanket. Her boots were neatly placed beside her cot, and on the metal frame hung a chain, two small rectangles of dull silver glinting in the moonlight. Her dog tags. He didn't hesitate. With careful fingers, he lifted them from the hook. They came away soundlessly, the chain warm from her skin. He stared at the names engraved there but didn't read them. He didn't care to. He just liked how they felt, heavy, forbidden, powerful. A piece of her identity in his hand. When he left the tent, the chain pressed into his palm, he grinned to himself. Tomorrow, he thought, would be interesting. Morning came with the same red dawn that stained everything in Afghanistan, sky and sand alike. Anna rose before the sun, as always. She dressed quietly, boots laced, uniform tucked, movements economical. Then she reached for the hook by her cot. Empty. Her fingers brushed metal that wasn't there. She froze for only a second, hand hovering in midair. Then she checked the floor, the blanket, the locker. Nothing. The chain was gone. For a heartbeat, something flickered in her, not anger, not fear, something colder, a memory. Her dog tags weren't just metal. They were the last tether to a past she'd buried, and the only proof of the person she'd promised never to be again. But she didn't react. Her face stayed neutral. Her pulse slowed. She finished dressing, buttoned her collar, and walked out into the dawn. To anyone watching, she looked the same as always, calm, precise, unreadable. And that calm was what unnerved them the most. Because Evans and his buddies were watching. They expected panic, a frantic search, an outburst, maybe even tears. But she gave them nothing. She checked manifests, directed unloading crews, oversaw a convoy inspection. The only visible difference was the bare skin at her neck, pale where the tags used to rest. By midday, their victory had soured. Her silence had become a mirror, reflecting their immaturity, their cowardice. The prank had no payoff. The grenade they'd pulled the pin from refused to explode. Then came the worst thing that could have happened for her, visibility. During morning formation, Lieutenant Wallace, young, eager, still polishing his authority like it was armor, noticed the absence. "Sergeant Sharma," he called, his tone sharp enough to draw attention. "Where are your dog tags? You know that's a direct violation of regs." She met his gaze. "I'm aware, sir. They appear to have been misplaced." "Misplaced?" His voice dripped with condescension. "This isn't some supply closet back in Germany, Sergeant. This is a war zone. You don't misplace essential gear. Find them. That's an order." "Yes, sir," she said simply. Evans smirked from the back row. The public humiliation sealed it. Now she wasn't just invisible. She was incompetent in the eyes of the company. Exactly what he wanted. She turned away from the formation, the whisper of gossip following her like smoke. But her stride didn't change. Her heartbeat didn't rise. She went straight back to the depot and resumed her checks. The system had to keep running. The machine couldn't stop for pride. Inside, she lifted a clipboard, cross-referenced serial numbers, checked seals. Outside, the sun rose higher, the heat pressing down like punishment. Sweat rolled down her temple, caught the light, vanished into the dust. To everyone else, she looked indifferent. But inside, something ancient was stirring, something she had buried under layers of quiet years ago. The prank didn't humiliate her, it reminded her that she was still capable of feeling, of anger, of violence. She pushed it down, not yet, not here. And then, somewhere on the horizon, thunder rolled. Except it wasn't thunder. The first mortar landed. The first explosion didn't sound real. It was too close, too sudden, a thunderclap of metal and fire that ripped the breath from the air. Sergeant Anna Sharma didn't flinch. She just froze, not with fear, but with calculation. The second mortar landed closer, its shockwaves slamming against the depot walls, sending dust and fragments of cardboard raining down. Then came the third, walking the barrage across the motor pool. The base alarms wailed, a long, rising scream that clawed through the chaos. Outside, the world disintegrated. Men ran without direction, rifles clutched but useless. Radios screamed orders that no one could hear. The air turned to smoke and sand. The earth trembled under the weight of impact after impact. To most, it felt like the end of the world. To Anna, it was a pattern. Her mind shifted gears, that subtle, terrifying click from routine to instinct. She wasn't thinking about manifests anymore. She was thinking about angles, trajectories, timing. This wasn't random shelling. The spacing, the rhythm, it was deliberate. Coordinated. Someone out there knew exactly what they were doing. The command post took a direct hit. A blast of orange and black flame erupted from its center, sending men sprawling. Screams cut through the static. Radios went dead. Lieutenant Wallace's voice broke across the net, high, panicked, incoherent. And still, Anna stayed where she was, crouched behind a row of sandbags at the depot entrance, her eyes scanning the horizon through the haze. Her breath was steady, her pulse even. The old instincts had returned like a ghost, slipping into an old skin. She tracked the direction of fire. The mortars were walking across the compound from north to east, a textbook feint. Draw defenders there, then strike where it hurts. The west wall. She could almost see it, the rocky wadi beyond the wire, the perfect approach for a ground assault. Covered, concealed, deadly. The radio crackled again. "This is Raptor 6 actual, we've lost the main ammo point. I repeat, ASP is gone. We're black on ammo at the west wall. We need resupply or we're done out here." The words snapped through her like electricity. The ammo supply point, the base's lifeline, had been hit, and without it, the west perimeter would fall within minutes. Around her, support personnel huddled behind crates, terrified. A cook, a comms tech, 2 mechanics. Kids, most of them. She looked at their faces, pale, dust-streaked, shaking, and something shifted behind her eyes. It was like watching a tide turn. The quiet background sergeant vanished. What rose in her place was someone older, sharper. Someone the army had buried years ago. Anna stood. The movement alone silenced the panic around her. "You too," she pointed to the mechanics. "Grab that steel pallet, we'll use it for cover." Her voice was calm, low, commanding. It didn't ask, it ordered. The cook blinked at her, trembling, his hand still gripping a radio. "You," she said, eyes locking on him, "you've got a sidearm. Anything that isn't us comes through that door, you shoot. You understand?" He nodded mute. Good. She turned to the comms tech. You pick up the local squad channel, don't speak, just listen. I need to know the second those mortars shift. Why yes, Sergeant. Anna moved with surgical precision through the depot, pulling down med kits, spare rifle magazines, a half-empty crate of grenades. She clipped a bandolier across her chest and slung a fallen soldier's M4 over her shoulder. The motion was fluid, familiar, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The cook stared at her, eyes wide. Ma'am, were you? Not now, she cut him off, checking the weapon's chamber. When the next salvo hits, we move. Stay behind me, keep your heads down. They didn't argue. Her certainty was magnetic, terrifying, and oddly comforting. In a base unraveling around them, she was gravity. The next mortar landed, then another. Now, Anna said. They burst from the depot into the blinding chaos. The mechanics struggled under the weight of the steel pallet, using it as a mobile wall as she led them in a zigzagging path toward the west. Bullets sliced the air, dirt exploded around them. Anna didn't flinch. She moved like water, fast, low, precise, every step calculated, every pause deliberate. She wasn't reacting to chaos, she was reading it. They dove behind a burning Humvee. The heat shimmered like a furnace. Machine gun fire tore the air above their heads, the rhythm steady, disciplined. They've got that lane zeroed, Anna muttered, scanning the ridge. Ridge line 50 meters, likely an RPK. If we don't silence it, we're dead here. She pointed to a low berm. I'll draw their fire. When I do, you move. Get behind that berm and suppress that ridge. Aim for the muzzle flash. Don't stop until you're empty. Then reload. Before they could answer, she was gone, a blur of motion disappearing into the smoke. 3 controlled bursts. Each one deliberate. Each one designed not to kill but to provoke. The enemy gunner took the bait. The ridge erupted with return fire, tracer rounds carving through the dust like red comets. The cook and mechanics sprinted for the berm, shouting, firing blindly, fear giving way to action. The machine gun hesitated, then fell silent. That was all Anna needed. She sprinted the last 50 meters to the west wall, the world narrowing to the sound of her own heartbeat. She could smell the cordite, feel the ground vibrate under each distant impact. And then she saw it, half buried under sand and debris. A collapsed section of an old blast wall. To anyone else it was junk. To her it was a memory. In her mind an old digital manifest flashed, a footnote she'd read weeks ago. A sealed Soviet-era munitions bunker, long forgotten, too unstable to use, too close to the perimeter to bother. But not to her. Here, she shouted, waving her small team forward. Dig. They clawed at the earth, frantic, desperate. Within minutes, their shovels struck something hard, steel, cold, and rusted. A sealed hatch. It's welded shut, one mechanic yelled, panic rising. Anna dropped to her knees, tearing open her med kit, but what she pulled out wasn't gauze or morphine. It was a compact breaching charge, military issue, specialized, not something logistics was supposed to have. She set it carefully on the hinge. Her hands didn't shake. Back, she ordered. A sharp pop, a flash of light. The hinge disintegrated. The door groaned, then fell inward with a scream of metal and dust. A wave of cool, stale air rolled out. She grabbed a flashlight, swept it across the darkness, and exhaled. Rows of green crates. Stamped markings faded with age. 7.62, 5.56 40 grenades. A treasure trove. Move it, she shouted. One crate at a time, straight to the trench. The mechanics didn't hesitate. Fear was gone. Purpose had replaced it. They became a lifeline ferrying ammunition from the forgotten bunker to the desperate defenders on the west wall. Each trip bought another minute of survival. Each crate meant another chance at life. Anna covered them, rifle tight in her grip, scanning the horizon. Her calm was absolute, her precision frightening, and all around her, the chaos began to shift. The tide impossibly was turning. At the wall, young soldiers who moments ago were certain of death now fought with renewed fury. Fresh ammo filled their magazines. Smoke and sand mingled with shouts of defiance. The line held. Anna didn't celebrate, she didn't shout. She just kept moving, her focus narrow, her breathing steady. She was back where she didn't want to be, in that place between logic and instinct, between calm and violence. The place she'd sworn to leave behind. But the machine needed fixing. And fixing things was what she did. Through the smoke, the sound of rotors cut through the noise, deep, heavy, powerful. A CH-47 Chinook descended from the sky like a mechanical angel, door gunners firing tracers into the ridgeline. It landed in a storm of red dust, the force of its blades flattening tents and whipping debris into the air. The rear ramp dropped, and a figure strode down, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing stars on his collar. Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne. He moved like a man who'd lived through 100 battles and didn't have time for ceremony. His eyes, cold, gray, assessing, swept the base in one glance. The burning command post, the broken defenses, the thin line of exhausted soldiers still fighting on the west wall. "Find me the ranking officer," he barked. Lieutenant Wallace stumbled forward, his face ghost-white. "General Thorne, sir, thank God. The co's down. The XO's hit. I'm the ranking officer." Thorne's gaze cut through him like a blade. "What happened?" "Mortars, RPGs, a full ground assault, sir. The main ASP is gone. The west wall's almost out of ammo." "Why the hell not resupply them?" Wallace stammered. "We couldn't, it was too dangerous to move through the open." Before Thorne could respond, movement caught his eye. A small fire team, 4 people, moving between smoke and debris with perfect precision, carrying ammo crates from somewhere near the wall. Their formation was tight, disciplined, not random chaos, trained. At their head was a woman. Calm, measured, commanding. "Who is that?" the general demanded. Wallace squinted through the dust. "That's Sergeant Sharma, sir, logistics." Thorne froze. The name hung in the air, and something deep in his memory stirred. "Sharma?" He didn't answer. His eyes tracked her, the way she directed movement under fire, the way her posture never broke. She wasn't just surviving, she was leading. And somewhere in the chaos, a small piece of metal caught the sunlight. Thorne bent, lifted it from the dirt. "Dog tags." He wiped the grime away with his thumb. "SHARMANA, SGT, U.S. Army." He almost pocketed them, until his thumb brushed over the second tag. A faint etching, a word he hadn't seen in years. "Kandahar." And below it, the silhouette of a phantom. Thorne's stomach dropped. Task Force Orion. A ghost story, a classified unit erased from records. And suddenly, the quiet logistics sergeant made perfect, terrifying sense. He looked up at her again, the woman calmly clearing a rifle jam for a terrified private. And in that instant, he knew. Ghost 7 had been hiding in plain sight. General Thorne stood frozen, the dog tags warm in his hand. A small, insignificant weight carrying an unbearable truth. The world around him burned and screamed, but for a moment, all he heard was silence. He had seen her name before, years ago. Buried in after action, reports so heavily redacted they were almost meaningless. Operation Anvil, Kandahar Province, Task Force Orion. The story whispered through the corridors of the Pentagon of a mission that went bad, a team that disappeared, a lone survivor who'd vanished into the system. But the whispers always ended the same way. She didn't want to be found. And yet here she was, building order out of chaos. Saving a base the system had already written off. "Sir," his command sergeant major called over the rotor wash. "We've got to move. the line stabilizing, but it won't hold without air cover. Thorne didn't answer. He was already walking, slow, deliberate, toward the western perimeter, toward her. Sergeant Anna Sharma didn't notice him at first. She was busy distributing the last of the ammunition crates. Her movements were methodical, unhurried. The battle still roared, but around her there was a strange calm like the eye of a storm. She wasn't barking orders. She didn't need to. Men moved when she looked at them. They followed her gestures, her pace. She radiated command the way some people radiate heat. Then she felt it, a shift in the air behind her. That old sixth sense, the kind you never lose. She turned. Through the smoke, the general emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform dusted in ash. The 3 silver stars on his collar caught the fading light. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were full of something heavy. He stopped a few feet away, held out his hand. Her dog tags lay there, resting in his palm. Anna stared at them. For a moment she didn't move. Then she reached out, her fingers closing around the chain, not gently, but with a quiet finality. She slipped them back over her neck, the metal settling against her collarbone like it never left. A small motion, but it felt like reclaiming something ancient, a name, a history, a truth. The general's voice was low. Task Force Orion. Anna met his gaze, calm and cold. That was a long time ago, sir. Not long enough, he said. His tone wasn't accusation, it was awe. She gave the faintest ghost of a smile. Apparently not. They stood there, the war still howling around them, but in that moment, it was as if time had stopped. The silence between them was a language of its own, one built on shared understanding, on scars both visible and unseen. Then Thorne exhaled. Sergeant, you've just saved this base. She didn't reply. Her expression didn't change. Just doing my job, sir. He almost laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. You call this logistics? Her eyes flicked toward the trench line where exhausted soldiers were still firing, reloading, fighting on with ammunition she delivered by hand. Someone had to keep the machine running, she said quietly. A single sentence, but it said everything. Behind them the battle was ending. The gunfire slowed, replaced by the distant sound of retreating engines. The insurgents were pulling back, their element of surprise shattered. Thorne turned to his comms officer. Get me a sitrep and find that Lieutenant Wallace. I want him here now. Within moments, the young officer stumbled forward, helmet askew, eyes wide. Sir. The general's voice dropped to a tone that could cut steel. Lieutenant, from this moment on, if Sergeant Sharma asks for anything, you give it to her. Ammo, water, air support. If she asks for an airstrike on this base, your only question is, how many, Sergeant? Do you understand me? Wallace blinked, but sir, she's... Do you understand me? Wallace swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Good. The general turned away. But his eyes found someone else. A young corporal standing at the edge of the trench, face pale, uniform filthy with dust. Evans. For a heartbeat, the corporal and the general locked eyes. And Thorne knew. He didn't need an explanation. The guilt was written all over the boy's face. The chain of cause and effect was clear, the missing dog tags, the humiliation, the timing. You, Thorne said, voice flat, almost gentle. You stay out of her way. You have no idea who you've been standing next to. Evans couldn't speak. His throat closed around the words. He just nodded, a short, desperate movement. He looked at Anna, still working, still calm, as if nothing had happened. And in that moment, every ounce of bravado he'd ever had collapsed into shame. The legend spread faster than fire. By the time the last shots faded, every man on base had heard the same story whispered in disbelief. Ghost 7. The Phantom of Kandahar. The one who never died. The command sergeant major, a man with 20 years of war etched into his face, found Lieutenant Wallace again near the med tents. He spoke quietly, but Evans overheard every word. "That's not just Sergeant Sharma," he said, his tone reverent. "That's Ghost 7, Task Force Orion." Wallace blinked. "Who?" The old soldier's eyes hardened. "Operation Anvil. They walked into a trap 30 clicks inside the green zone. Whole team wiped out, all except her. For 3 days she was the only friendly asset in 100 square kilometers. Wounded, outnumbered. She carried intel that stopped an entire offensive, led a lost platoon to safety while half the province hunted her." He paused, his voice lowering. "We listened to her over comms, thought she was a myth. Turns out she was real. They buried her in logistics because she asked to disappear." The word spread, man to man, tent to tent. And with every telling, the atmosphere of the base shifted from mockery to reverence, from arrogance to humility. By dawn, the gunfire had stopped completely. The smoke thinned into morning light. What remained of Fob Razorback stood in eerie silence. Broken walls, cratered roads, the acrid stench of burnt diesel. Anna was already working. While medics carried the wounded and engineers rebuilt barriers, she moved through the supply depot with a clipboard and pen, the same calm efficiency as before. Counting, cataloging, rebuilding the system. To her, the battle wasn't over. It was just another audit. The system had failed, and she was repairing it. Evans watched her from 50 meters away, Miller and Chun beside him, silent, hollow-eyed. None of them had slept. None of them spoke. The weight of what they'd done hung between them like smoke. She had saved their lives, every single one of them. And they had mocked her. Evans felt something he hadn't in years, shame that didn't fade with time. After hours of silence, he straightened. "We have to," he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. The others nodded. They didn't ask what, they already knew. Together, the 3 men walked toward the depot. Each step felt heavier than the last. The morning sun cast long shadows behind them, 3 figures walking towards something they didn't deserve. Anna didn't turn when they entered. She was typing on her laptop, the quiet rhythm of keys the only sound in the tent. Evans cleared his throat. "Sergeant." She paused, the tapping stopped. But she didn't turn around. The silence stretched, long, thick, unbearable. When she finally did turn, her face was unreadable, calm, tired. Her gray eyes met theirs without a hint of emotion. There was no anger, no triumph, no satisfaction. Just the same silence she'd always given them. But now that silence weighed 1,000 pounds. Evans opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say? "Sorry we mocked you. Sorry we stole the proof of who you were." Nothing felt big enough. Nothing felt right. So instead he stood straight, snapped to attention, and saluted. It wasn't regulation. It was reverence. It was the only apology that mattered. Miller and Chun followed, their movements stiff, trembling. The 3 of them stood there, not boys anymore, not soldiers pretending to be warriors, but men finally understanding what respect truly meant. Anna looked at them for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slow, quiet, final. "Dismissed." No words. No forgiveness. Just that small, merciful nod. Then she turned back to her work. The sound of keys filled the silence again, the same steady rhythm that had kept the base alive. Outside, the general watched from a distance. He saw the salute. He saw the nod. And for the first time in years, Marcus Thorne smiled. A small, knowing smile. "Sergeant Major," he said quietly, "when we get back to Bagram, I want Sharma's real file, the unredacted one." "Yes, sir." "And draft a transfer order." "To where, sir?" Thorne's eyes stayed on her, the quiet figure at her desk, the sunlight catching the chain at her neck. Wherever she wants, he said softly. The Pentagon, Virginia, command of her own damn task force, wherever she wants to go. Make it happen. The sergeant major nodded, understood. The general looked out over the compound one last time. The smoke was clearing. The sounds of rebuilding echoed, hammers, engines, shouted orders. But the space around the supply depot was different. Quieter. Sacred. Men walked slower there, spoke softer. It wasn't fear. It was respect, the kind you feel in the presence of something unspoken, something greater than medals or rank. And in that silence, the faint glint of Anna's dog tags caught the light again. Two small pieces of metal that no longer needed explanation. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The wind shifted over Fob Razorback, carrying with it the bitter scent of smoke, diesel, and the faint sweetness of burnt dust. The kind of air that clings to your lungs for days. The kind that never truly leaves you. The sun had risen, a hard white disk in a washed-out sky. For most of the base, morning meant relief. For Sergeant Anna Sharma, it meant inventory. She stood in the supply depot doorway, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the wreckage outside. The compound was a scarred landscape, craters, shredded canvas, overturned vehicles. And yet, beneath it all, the faint rhythm of order was returning. Voices rose hoarse, tired but steady. Engines coughed to life. Shovels scraped against sandbags. The machine, wounded but breathing, was trying to stand again. Anna watched for a moment, her expression unreadable, then turned back inside. There was work to do. Each crate she touched, each mark she made with her pen, was a small act of control. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was almost meditative. Numbers, weights, serial codes, the language she trusted. The only one that made sense anymore. But behind the neat handwriting, behind the calm, something restless stirred. It had been years since she'd heard that name, Ghost 7. Years since anyone had said it aloud. And yet last night, it came back to her like a voice from the dead. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Because with the silence came the memories. It had been Kandahar. Different air, same dust. Different war, same ghosts. She could still feel the vibration of the rotor blades that day. The thud-thud-thud that sank into her bones as the Black Hawk lifted off, her team aboard, faces hidden behind tinted goggles. 6 of them. Task Force Orion, the kind of unit that officially didn't exist. They'd been sent to intercept a high-value courier, moving through a valley crawling with Taliban fighters. It was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab. It was. The LZ was compromised before they even touched down. Gunfire from 3 directions, RPGs lighting up the night like lightning made of fire. Anna could still see it. Corporal Vega hit before he even left the ramp, the smell of fuel and burning nylon, the pilot's last words cut off mid-sentence. They fought for hours. They held a ridgeline until their ammo ran dry, then fought hand-to-hand in the dark. By sunrise, she was alone. And the radio, God, that cursed radio, crackled with voices asking for coordinates she couldn't give, asking for status she couldn't speak. She could barely move, blood soaking through her sleeve, dust caked in her mouth. But she didn't die. She wouldn't. Because there was something she carried, intel she couldn't lose. A hard drive no bigger than her palm, wrapped in cloth, pressed to her chest like a heartbeat. For 72 hours, she crawled through hell to deliver it. She still remembered the last transmission she'd sent before her radio failed. Ghost 7 to command, all others KIA, proceeding alone. And the reply faint, almost drowned in static. Copy that, Ghost 7, you are not alone. But she was. She always had been. When they pulled her out 3 days later, she weighed 90 pounds, half delirious, the side of her face burned, her left arm held together with field dressing and willpower. The photos never made it to the press. The citations were classified. The medal, she was told, didn't officially exist. And when the dust settled, she asked for one thing: to disappear. They gave her a desk, then a depot, then a forgotten corner of a forgotten war. And for a long time, it was enough. To be unseen. To not have to remember. Until last night. Until the mortars. Until the smell of cordite pulled her back into a past she had sworn to bury. A voice broke through her thoughts. Permission to enter, Sergeant. She turned. Lieutenant Wallace stood in the doorway, his uniform clean but still wrinkled, his expression hesitant. Behind him, the morning sun framed him in pale light, a silhouette of youth and uncertainty. Anna simply nodded. He stepped in, clearing his throat. General Thorne asked me to make sure you had everything you need. Supplies, manpower, whatever you ask for. She studied him. His collar was still crooked. His hands fidgeted when he talked. The nervous energy of a man who had seen too much too soon. "Thank you, sir," she said. Her tone was even, respectful but not deferential. There was something in her voice, a quiet authority that made rank irrelevant. He hesitated. "Sergeant, I didn't know who you were. None of us did." "You weren't supposed to," she said. He nodded, unsure whether that made him feel better or worse. "They're saying you saved the base," he tried again. "The men, they're calling you Ghost 7. Is that true?" Anna's eyes drifted to the dust-coated window. Beyond it, soldiers moved like ants, rebuilding what they'd nearly lost. "Names," she said softly, "are for people who need to be remembered." She looked back at him. "I don't." Wallace didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. "If there's anything." "There is," she interrupted. "The west wall, reinforce it, triple the water rations, keep the medics close. This isn't over." The lieutenant blinked. "You think they'll hit again?" She didn't answer directly. "They always do." He swallowed. "Yes, Sergeant," then quieter, "Thank you." When he left, the tent fell back into silence. Anna exhaled, setting down the clipboard. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the desk, knuckles white. It was strange how easily command came back. How natural it felt to take control, to move pieces on the board. It frightened her a little, that old version of herself, the one who thrived in chaos, still lived beneath the calm. For years, she'd thought that woman was gone. Now she wasn't so sure. Later, when the sun dipped low, she walked the perimeter alone. The sand crunched under her boots. The world was painted in bruised gold and long shadows. Every step took her closer to the western wall, the place she'd stood when the battle turned. The soldiers on guard straightened when they saw her. They didn't salute. They didn't speak. They just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. She stopped near the sandbags, looking out across the open ground. The wadi stretched into the distance, jagged and empty, but she could still feel eyes watching from beyond the ridges. She rested a hand on the barrier, fingers brushing against the rough fabric. The same wall she'd defended. The same wall she'd almost died at twice in her life, in 2 different wars. Funny, she thought, how history circles back. A voice came from behind her. "Never thought I'd find you out here alone." General Thorne approached, his boots crunching softly. His tone was neither reprimand nor concern, just understanding. "Old habits," she said. "Yeah." He stood beside her, looking out at the horizon. For a while, neither spoke. The air was still, heavy with heat and the faint hum of generators in the distance. Finally, he broke the silence. "When I saw those tags, I didn't believe it, thought the stories were propaganda. Then I saw you move." Anna gave a small smile. "Stories always get bigger than the people they're about." "Not that one," he said quietly. Another pause. "You could have left it buried," Thorne continued. "You could have stayed a ghost, but you didn't." She looked at him. "They needed ammunition." "That's not all they needed." Her eyes softened. Maybe, but it's all I had to give. Thorne studied her face, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the calm forged from too many storms. What will you do now? She shrugged. Fix the depot, restock, keep the system running. He nodded, but his tone carried something deeper. That's not what I meant. Anna turned back to the desert, the dying light reflected in her eyes. I was good at war, General, too good. The kind of good that leaves you empty when it's over. So I learned to build things instead. Count crates, organize shelves, because if I stopped, if I let myself think about what I'd done, I wouldn't make it through another sunrise. Thorne said nothing. He didn't need to. The truth hung between them, sharp and fragile. Finally, she whispered, I thought silence would heal me. Turns out it just made me forget who I was. He nodded slowly, and now? She exhaled. Now maybe I remember enough to forgive myself. The general looked at her, a woman carved from quiet strength, standing against the ruins of war, and felt something shift inside him. Go 7, he murmured. Don't call me that. He smiled faintly. Then what should I call you? She thought for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Just Anna, she said, just someone trying to keep the lights on. The two stood in silence until the sun finally slipped below the ridges, leaving the base in the soft blue of twilight. As they turned back toward the depot, Thorne spoke one last time. For what it's worth, he said, the army could use more ghosts like you. Anna didn't reply. But as she walked, the faint clink of her dog tags was the only sound in the fading light, a metallic heartbeat echoing through the quiet. Somewhere deep inside, the part of her that had survived Kandahar stirred again. Not as a weapon, as a memory. A reminder that even the most haunted souls can still protect, rebuild, endure. The wind picked up, carrying the last traces of smoke away into the night. And in that calm, a single thought rose in her mind, soft and certain. Sometimes, the loudest victories are fought in silence. 3 days after the attack, the dust finally began to settle. Literally and otherwise. Fob Razorback was quieter now. The kind of quiet that follows survival, not peace, but exhaustion. The smoke that had once blackened the horizon was gone, leaving behind pale skies and the endless hum of generators filling the gaps between thought and sleep. Most of the men had returned to their routines, but something in their rhythm had changed. Orders carried weight again, eyes met with a trace of humility. The cocky laughter that used to echo through the motor pool was softer now, careful, almost respectful. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. The kind that only comes after seeing how close death can get. Sergeant Anna Sharma walked through the heart of the base with a clipboard in hand, just as she always had. The difference was in how people moved around her. No more muttered jokes, no more sidelong glances. Now when she passed, conversations paused, heads dipped. She didn't acknowledge it, she didn't have to. Respect didn't need validation, it just existed. Still, the attention made her uneasy. She wasn't built for reverence. She preferred invisibility, the quiet corners where the world forgot she existed. But now the silence around her wasn't dismissal. It was reverence. And reverence was heavy. She spent her mornings in the depot, repairing what could be saved. Crates that survived the bombardment were sorted and stacked, damaged ones logged and stripped for parts. The neatness returned, line by line, box by box. The supply depot was once again a machine, and Anna, its quiet heartbeat. But at night, when the generators hummed and the stars glimmered faintly through dust, the quiet became unbearable. Sleep was impossible. Every sound, the creak of canvas, the distant cough of an engine, pulled her back to Kandahar, to the sound of rotor blades and fire, to voices she couldn't save. Sometimes she'd wake sitting upright, her hand already on a weapon that wasn't there. Sometimes she'd find herself standing by the door without remembering how she got there. Ghost 7 never really left. She just waited. Evans watched her from a distance for days before he found the courage to speak. The guilt was a knot in his chest, too heavy to untangle, too sharp to ignore. Every time he saw her pass, calm and precise, it twisted tighter. He'd rehearsed words 100 times in his head, but they always came out wrong. He didn't want forgiveness, he wanted to understand. On the fourth evening after the attack, he found her sitting alone behind the depot, the sky dimming into a wash of red and violet. She was cleaning a rifle not for use, but out of habit. The movement was methodical, almost ritualistic. "Sergeant," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "Corporal." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "I wanted to say thank you." "Not necessary." "I think it is." Her hands paused on the bolt assembly, then continued. "You're alive, that's thanks enough." Evans shifted awkwardly, his voice low. "We were wrong about you, about everything." Anna didn't respond. He took a breath. "When we took your tags, we thought it was funny. We didn't know." She interrupted softly. "You didn't want to know." He froze. She looked up at him for the first time, her eyes calm but unflinching. "That's what makes it easier," she continued. "Not knowing who people really are. It lets you pretend your cruelty is harmless." Her words weren't angry. They were quiet, factual, and somehow that was worse. Evans swallowed hard. "You're right." Anna studied him for a long moment, then set the rifle aside. "What matters is what you do after you know." He nodded slowly. "We've been helping the engineers rebuild the West Wall. Miller and Chun, too, thought you'd want to know." She gave a small nod, the closest thing to approval he'd ever get. "Sergeant," he asked suddenly, "were you really Ghost 7? Anna's eyes drifted to the horizon. The dying light made her face unreadable. "That's just a story." "But it's true, isn't it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the rifle and began reassembling it. The pieces clicked into place with soft precision. When she finished, she spoke not to him, but to the twilight. "Stories keep soldiers alive. Doesn't matter if they're true. Sometimes they need to believe someone made it out, even if it's just a ghost." Evans nodded, but his throat was tight. "Maybe, but I think the real ones are the ones who stay, the ones who fix what's left." Anna glanced at him, the briefest flicker of something almost like a smile. "Then keep fixing it, Corporal." He stood there for another moment, unsure of what else to say. Then he saluted quietly and walked away, the sound of his boots fading into the night. When he was gone, Anna sat for a long time, her fingers tracing the smooth edge of the rifle's receiver. For the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, General Thorne returned. His helicopter descended in a swirl of red dust, rotors chopping the air like a heartbeat. The base came alive at the sound. Men straightened their uniforms. Officers scrambled to look busy. But Anna didn't move. She was loading crates onto a forklift, directing the driver with a hand signal. The rhythm of work didn't change, not for generals, not for ghosts. Thorne found her exactly where he expected to. "Sergeant," he greeted, voice low but carrying. She turned, wiped the dust from her hands, and nodded. "General." He handed her a folder, manila, thick, sealed with a red band. "Your file." Anna frowned slightly. "Sir." "The real one," he said, "not the version logistics keeps." She didn't open it. "There's also a transfer order," he added. "Anywhere you want. Training command, the Pentagon, DC, hell, I'll give you your own task force if that's what you want." Anna looked at the folder, then at him. Her expression softened, but only slightly. "That's generous, sir." "You've earned it." She exhaled. "I already have what I need." Thorne tilted his head. "And what's that?" She looked around at the depot, the soldiers working, the repaired grid of crates, the rising order from chaos. "This," she said simply, "structure, noise, purpose." The general studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Purpose can be dangerous for people like us. Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. So can forgetting. Thorne sighed, tucking his hands into his pockets. If you change your mind, you know how to reach me. I won't, she said, but her voice carried warmth, not defiance. He smiled faintly. You never know. As he turned to leave, she called out, General. He stopped. Thank you for not asking the questions you already know the answers to. He nodded once, understanding perfectly. Take care of them, Sergeant. I always do. That night the base slept. For the first time in weeks the air was still. Anna sat alone at her desk, the faint light of her laptop illuminating her face. She opened the folder the general had given her. Inside were photographs, grainy black and white, classified beyond clearance. A ridge, a valley. 6 faces. Her team. They were younger than she remembered, frozen in time. She traced her fingers over each one. Vega, Morales, Pike, Reyes, Hunt. Ghosts, all of them. And then at the bottom, a small faded note. Declassified, Operator Ghost 7, presumed KIA 2012. She stared at the words until they blurred. Then slowly, she closed the folder. For a long while, she didn't move. Then she opened a blank manifest form and began to type. Not numbers this time, not inventory. Names. One by one, she typed them out, the names of the 5 soldiers she'd lost. When she was done, she saved the document and closed the laptop. Her hands trembled once, then went still. Outside, the desert wind rose again, carrying faint echoes of voices long gone. Anna stood, walked to the tent flap, and looked out over the sleeping base. The lights glowed soft and warm, scattered like fallen stars across the dark. She whispered, barely audible, You can rest now, I'm still here. The wind answered with silence. And for the first time in years, that silence didn't hurt. The next morning, Evans found a note pinned to the depot door. Handwritten, neat, unmistakably hers. To all personnel. Order has been restored. Inventory cycle resumes today. The system works because we make it work. Do your part, watch your sector, take care of each other. SGTA Sharma. Below it, a single line drawn in pen, clean, straight, deliberate. Evans stood there for a long moment, reading it again and again. Then he smiled faintly. Because somehow, that small, precise note carried more weight than any speech ever could. Later that day, as the sun climbed, the soldiers began their work, refueling vehicle, stacking crates, rebuilding the base. And amidst it all, Sergeant Anna Sharma moved quietly, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning, assessing, fixing. The ghost was gone. What remained was something rarer. A woman who had found a way to live among the ruins, not by forgetting the past, but by mastering it. Her legend had become a story again, told softly around campfires, passed from soldier to soldier. They said she didn't sleep, that she could hear trouble before it came. They said she'd been to hell and come back just to make sure no one else had to go. But the truth was simpler. She was just there, day after day, doing the work no one noticed until it saved them all. And when the wind blew through the depot, making the chain around her neck whisper softly, it sounded almost like the faintest echo of applause. The kind that comes not from crowds, but from ghosts. The desert wind carried the sound of engines that morning, heavy, mechanical, deliberate. A convoy approaching from the south. Anna heard it before she saw it. Her ear caught the subtle difference between transport trucks and command vehicles, between routine and importance. She set her clipboard down, eyes narrowing slightly as the first Humvee rolled through the gate. The convoy was dust-caked, guarded by MPs who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Behind them, an armored personnel carrier hummed, followed by a black SUV. Black wasn't regulation here. Black meant command. A ripple moved through the base, curious glances, muttered guesses. Word spread quickly. Someone big is here. Anna already knew who. When the door opened, General Marcus Thorne stepped out, his uniform immaculate despite the dust. His eyes scanned the base like a man seeing the aftermath of a storm he'd predicted. But he wasn't alone this time. A second figure followed, younger, sharp suit, clean boots, too polished for this place. Intelligence. The kind that didn't smile. Anna didn't move. She stood where she always did by the depot, watching, calm, detached. The world moved toward her now, and she simply waited for it to arrive. Thorne walked straight to her. "Sergeant." "General." He gestured toward the man beside him. "This is Agent Kessler, Defense Intelligence." Kessler nodded politely, though the gesture felt more like a measurement than a greeting. "Sergeant Sharma," he said, "we've been looking for you." Anna's expression didn't change. "You're a little late." Thorne smiled faintly. "That's what I told him." Kessler didn't smile back. "You were listed as deceased in 2012 under classified parameters. Task Force Orion, Operation Anvil. There's no record of a reassignment." "I like it that way," Anna said. "I'm sure you do," Kessler replied, flipping open a folder. "But unfortunately, the world doesn't stop turning when someone disappears. We've reviewed your after-action record, the mission data, the intercept recovered during the Kandahar withdrawal." Anna didn't look at him. She looked past him toward the horizon. "You found the data packet," she said quietly. "Yes," Kessler confirmed. "And the encryption markers. They're identical to a new intercept we pulled 3 weeks ago." Thorne frowned. "Meaning what?" Kessler met Anna's eyes. "Meaning someone out there is running old Orion protocols. Your protocols." The words hung in the air like static. Even the wind seemed to pause. Anna's jaw tightened. "That's impossible." Kessler's tone didn't shift. "Apparently not. Whoever's using them has access to systems that shouldn't exist. We traced one of the transmission routes to this sector, not far from Razorback." Thorne crossed his arms. "You think insurgents found old hardware?" "Maybe," Kessler said. "Or maybe someone's selling ghosts." He let the implication hang. Anna didn't flinch. "What do you want from me?" Kessler closed the folder. "We want you to confirm what we're dealing with. These codes, you wrote them. You're the only one who can recognize the signatures." Thorne interjected. "You're asking her to step back into a shadow she chose to leave." Kessler's expression didn't change. "I'm asking her to prevent a ghost war." The rest of the base watched from a distance, soldiers pretending to work, while their eyes followed every word, every gesture. They didn't know what was happening, only that something had shifted again. Anna's silence stretched, then finally she spoke. "How long?" 2 days, Kessler said. "Maybe less before the trail goes cold." She nodded once, a motion so small it was almost invisible. "Then we don't have time to waste." Thorne frowned. "Anna." She turned to him, her eyes calm but firm. "You know what's at stake, General. If someone has Orion access, it's not just data, it's targeting protocols, mission archives, command schematics, the kind of information that gets entire outposts erased." Thorne's jaw worked. "I know, I just don't want you to disappear again." Her gaze softened just for a moment. "I already disappeared, sir. I'm just back on borrowed time." He sighed, the sound more personal than professional. "What do you need?" She didn't hesitate. "A vehicle, satellite relay access, and 3 volunteers." "Volunteers?" Kessler asked. Anna's eyes flicked toward the motor pool. "Men I trust." She found them where she knew they'd be, near the west wall, repairing sandbags in the late light. Evans looked up first. "Sergeant," he greeted, cautious but respectful. "Miller Chun," she acknowledged with a nod. They stood straighter automatically. The old fear was gone. What replaced it was something heavier, a kind of loyalty that doesn't need orders. "You three busy?" she asked. Chun wiped sweat from his neck. "Depends on who's asking." Anna's lips twitched. "Me." "Then we're free," Evans said quickly. She studied him. He didn't avert his eyes this time. "Good." "There's a situation," she said simply. "Something near Sector Echo. I need a driver, a comms operator, and a lookout." Evans exchanged glances with the others. "What kind of situation?" "The kind you don't write reports about," she said. They didn't ask again. By nightfall, the four of them, Anna, Evans, Miller, and Chun, rolled out in a dusty, up-armored Humvee. The headlights dimmed, radios silent. The desert stretched endlessly, painted in silver moonlight and black shadow. Inside the cab, no one spoke. The hum of the engine filled the space between them. Evans drove, his hands tight on the wheel. He'd been nervous before missions plenty of times, but this felt different. He wasn't sure if it was because of where they were going, or who was sitting beside him. Anna watched the horizon, her profile carved from calm. Every few minutes she'd check the handheld receiver, adjusting frequencies. Her movements were small, deliberate, efficient. "Sector Echo's an old comms relay, right?" Miller finally asked. "Used to be," Anna said, "before the Soviets left it for the desert to swallow. But the signal Kessler's chasing, it's coming from there." "And if it's not insurgents?" Evans asked quietly. Anna glanced at him. "Then we find out who still remembers ghosts." They reached the ridge just before midnight. The relay tower stood half-collapsed, a jagged skeleton of rusted metal cutting into the night sky. Everything was still, too still. Anna raised her hand, the universal signal, "Stop." The engine died. Silence rushed in. They dismounted, weapons ready. Evans kept to her left, Miller and Chun flanking wide. The moonlight glinted off broken antennae and shattered satellite dishes. No movement, no heat signatures. Then faintly the sound, a static pulse, rhythmic, mechanical, emanating from somewhere underground. Anna's heart sank. She knew that sound. She'd heard it once long ago in another life. "It's a beacon," she murmured. Chun frowned. "Beacon for what?" She didn't answer. She was already moving, sweeping her flashlight across the debris until it caught something metallic, a hatch, half buried in sand. The same Soviet design she'd seen at Razorback. She knelt, brushed the sand away, and examined the locking mechanism. New welds, fresh scorch marks. Someone had been here recently. Evans swallowed. "You think it's a trap?" She looked up at him, eyes flat and calm. "Everything's a trap until proven otherwise." She motioned for them to cover. Then she unlatched the hatch and pulled. The door groaned open. A rush of stale air escaped, carrying the faint, acrid smell of oil and electricity. They descended cautiously, flashlights slicing through darkness. The stairs spiraled downward, deeper than they expected. At the bottom lay a chamber filled with old communication consoles, Soviet-era relics patched with modern wiring. Cables snaked across the floor toward a single humming device in the center, a portable transmitter blinking faint green. Anna approached it slowly, eyes narrowing. The display scrolled with coordinates and a coded phrase. "Orion active echo source confirmed." Evans whispered, "Sergeant, what is that?" Anna's pulse quickened. "A relay activation key. Someone's trying to wake something up." Miller frowned. "Wake what up?" She turned to them, voice low, serious. Task Force Orion wasn't just an operations unit. It was an entire digital network, encrypted field intelligence. Mission archives, operator locations, safe houses. Everything classified under one command protocol. Chun blinked. "So if this thing's live?" "It's broadcasting every shadow mission the Army ever buried," she finished. The weight of it settled like a physical thing. Evans took a step closer. "Can you shut it down?" Anna stared at the console. Maybe, but it's not just running, it's responding. To what? She hesitated. To someone who still has access. And then the transmitter beeped once, sharp and clear. A new line appeared on the display. Othki VRFID, Ghost 7 recognized. The blood drained from Evan's face. What does that mean? Anna stared at the screen, her reflection flickering across it. It means, she whispered, someone just called me home. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the machine and the faint wind howling through the tunnel above. Evans finally broke the silence. What do we do now? Anna looked up, her expression unreadable, a storm of memory and instinct behind her calm. We find out who's pretending to be me, she said softly, and why. Then she reached down, flicked the switch on the transmitter, and the light went dark. The chamber fell silent. But in that silence, far away, somewhere in the desert night, another device answered. A faint pulse of green, alive, waiting. And for the first time in years, Ghost 7 felt the pull of the shadows she'd tried so hard to escape. The desert was different at dawn, pale, empty, and silent in a way that felt ancient. But beneath that silence, Anna could feel it again, movement. Something in the air had changed. They had returned to Razorback just before sunrise, dust-covered and wired from the mission. Thorne was waiting. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, the way commanders look at soldiers who have crossed a line they can't uncross. Kessler stood beside him, arms folded, eyes unreadable. He already knew the outcome. Anna handed him a small, scorched drive bag. Data pulled from the relay. Transmissions rerouted through 5 ghost channels, all Orion code. But it's not insurgents. The handshakes are too clean. Kessler's brow furrowed. Then who? She met his gaze. Someone inside the system, someone with top-tier clearance. Thorne swore under his breath. We buried Orion for a reason. Kessler opened the bag, scanning the recovered chip under his flashlight. Then someone just dug it up. He looked at Anna. I need you to decrypt this. No, her answer came instantly, quiet but final. Kessler blinked. Excuse me. I said no. He straightened. You're the only one who can read the old protocols. I burned that part of me years ago. Kessler's tone hardened. Sergeant, this isn't about you. If those codes fall into the wrong hands, entire units could be exposed. You don't have a choice. Anna's eyes flashed. There's always a choice, you just don't like the cost. The silence between them was sharp enough to cut. Thorne finally stepped in. Enough. His voice was low, dangerous. Agent, you'll treat her with respect. She's already given you more than anyone else could. Kessler exhaled through his nose. With respect, General, we're running out of time. Someone's reactivating a system that doesn't officially exist. The only person capable of stopping it is standing right here, pretending she's retired. Anna didn't flinch. I'm not pretending, I'm surviving. Kessler held her gaze for a long moment, then turned away. You'll change your mind when you see what's on that drive. Hours later, the base quieted again. Evans and the others returned to work. Though the tension lingered, whispers about secret missions, strange visitors, and the look in Sergeant Sharma's eyes when she came back from the desert. Anna sat alone in the operations tent, staring at the sealed chip resting on the table. It seemed to hum faintly, like it knew it was being watched. She hated how familiar it felt. How easily the old instincts stirred: analysis, pattern recognition, code rhythm. The part of her brain that could read encryption like music. She thought she'd buried it under years of spreadsheets and crate numbers. Apparently, ghosts don't stay buried. Her fingers brushed the chip. Static sparked beneath her skin. The moment she touched it, memories crashed in. The first time she'd built the Orion cipher, the long nights of testing, The way her team used to laugh when the algorithm sang like Morse code turned to heartbeat. She could still hear Ray's saying, "You built a ghost net, Sharma, something that listens even when no one's speaking." Now that same net was speaking back. Outside, the wind shifted again. A shadow moved past the tent entrance. Kessler. He didn't announce himself, just stepped inside and closed the flap behind him. His expression was softer this time, the sharp professionalism dulled by fatigue. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She didn't answer. He nodded toward the chip. "You've looked. I told you I'm done." "You're not," he said quietly. "You wouldn't still be sitting here if you were." Anna sighed, leaning back. "You don't understand what that system was. Orion wasn't just data, it was people. Operators, families, safe houses. You think turning it back on will save lives? It won't. It'll burn them." Kessler hesitated. For a moment the agent mask slipped. "You think I don't know that? You think I wanted this assignment? They sent me because you're not supposed to exist, and because someone decided ghosts don't get a vote." Their eyes met, soldier and spy, both tired, both bound by secrets they didn't choose. He placed a small drive key on the table. "This decrypts only what's relevant. If you open it, you'll see what we're up against. If you do," he exhaled, "then we'll both watch it happen from here." He turned to leave. Anna's voice stopped him. "Why do you care?" Kessler paused at the flap. "Because the first time I read your file, I thought they made you up. And now that I know you're real, I'd rather not watch you vanish twice." Then he was gone. Anna sat there for a long time. Outside, generators hummed. The bass breathed around her. Finally, she reached forward and inserted the key. The screen flickered alive, the green text spilling like rain across the display. Encrypted burst, call signs, coordinates. And then one phrase repeated, over and over. "Retrieve Ghost 7, Operation Reclamation." Anna's blood ran cold. This wasn't about stolen data. It was about her. Someone inside the system was calling her back, not to stop Orion, but to restart it. Her hand trembled slightly as she scrolled further. Then she froze. A set of coordinates appeared at the bottom of the feed. They weren't random. She recognized them instantly. Kandahar province. The ridge, the valley, the place she'd nearly died 13 years ago. It wasn't coincidence. It was a message. Thorne found her there an hour later, still staring at the screen. "You opened it," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "They're calling me home." "I know." "You knew." He nodded slowly. "Kessler briefed me. Command thinks if you trace the signal, you can find whoever's resurrecting Orion. They call it Operation Reclamation." She let out a bitter laugh. "That's what they always call it, something clean, something bureaucratic, as if reclaiming ghosts doesn't come with a price." Thorne stepped closer. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." He studied her face, the calm mask she wore when making peace with impossible choices. "You've already given enough." Anna finally looked at him. "If I don't end this, someone else will, and they won't care what gets lost in the process. I built Orion, Marcus. I owe it the mercy of ending it right." He exhaled, defeat in his shoulders. "Then I'm coming with you." She shook her head. "You can't. I outrank you." She gave a faint smile. "You always didn't stop me before." Thorne's jaw tightened. "At least take a team." "I already have one." He knew who she meant. Evans, Miller, Chun. "Then God help them," he muttered. That night Anna sat outside the depot, the desert wind brushing her face. The stars were hard and distant. Evans approached quietly, hesitant. "We're leaving again, aren't we?" She looked at him. "How'd you know?" "You get that look before you move, like you're already somewhere else." She didn't deny it. He crouched beside her, silent for a moment. "You think it's another trap?" She stared into the dark horizon. It's worse than a trap, it's a test. Of what? Whether I can walk back into hell without becoming what I was. Evans hesitated, then said softly, "You won't. You're not that person anymore." Anna looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression shifted, almost tender. "I hope you're right." At 400 hours they rolled out again. No announcement, no orders. Just a convoy of four, Anna in the lead, the desert stretching wide and indifferent before them. The radio crackled with faint static, nothing more. She preferred it that way. Silence was safer. But somewhere far beyond the dunes, the same green light pulsed again, a twin signal echoing her path, guiding her towards something that refused to die. She didn't know whether she was chasing the past or being chased by it. All she knew was that she had one more mission left, one that wasn't in any file, one she'd never be remembered for. To bury a ghost. Her own. The desert at night had a sound. Not silence, never silence, but a low, endless whisper, like the earth itself remembering every voice it had buried. The convoy moved through it like a shadow, 4 soldiers, headlights dimmed, hearts caught between duty and dread. No one spoke. Ahead of them, the ridge rose from the sand, black, against a silver horizon. Kandahar Valley. The place where Ghost 7 died, and Anna Sharma was born again. Evans slowed the Humvee as they neared the coordinates. The GPS blinked an angry red dot. "Here," Anna said quietly, "cut the engine." The motor stuttered, then stopped. The desert swallowed the sound. They dismounted in silence. Miller adjusted his rifle strap. "You really think whoever's doing this is down there?" Anna scanned the ridge. The moonlight revealed faint shapes, steel wreckage half buried by time, the skeletal remains of what once was an outpost. She recognized every bend of metal, every scar. "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." Chun frowned. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Anna didn't answer. She just started walking. The sand gave way to rock. Each step echoed off the valley walls. Evans followed close behind, watching her shoulders tense, her posture straighten like muscle memory awakening. At the edge of the ridge, Anna stopped. The wind hissed over the rocks, carrying faint static. The same pulse she'd heard in the bunker at Echo Sector. She knelt, brushing away the sand. Beneath it lay a transmitter, small, modern, blinking faint green. The same code scrolled across its screen, Orion active. Evans exhaled. "It's still running." Anna's gaze hardened. "No, it's calling." Before anyone could respond, a voice crackled over a hidden speaker, soft, distorted, female. "Ghost 7, authentication confirmed." Evans froze. "That's..." Anna's stomach tightened. "Me." The voice repeated, clearer this time. "Older. Warn. If you're hearing this, it means I failed." Anna's blood ran cold. It wasn't a transmission. It was a recording. Her own voice. For a moment, no one moved. Evans whispered, "What is this?" Anna's eyes never left the device. "It's a contingency file. I recorded it after Operation Anvil in case Orion ever reactivated. It's a dead man's switch." The recording continued, the voice steadier now. Orion was designed to protect operators, to erase them if captured. But every system built to erase has to know what it's erasing. That's the flaw. I built it, and I couldn't unbuild it. The voice paused, a sigh through static. "If they bring Orion back, it won't protect anyone. It'll expose them, all of them, because ghosts can't hide from a signal that knows their names." The recording faded into silence. Miller swallowed. "So what happens now?" Anna straightened slowly. "Now we end it." They began searching the ridge. Beneath the rocks, cables ran in every direction, old Soviet conduits repurposed with fresh wiring. Evans traced one to a small generator, humming faintly. Another cable disappeared into a collapsed tunnel. Someone been maintaining this, Chun murmured. Not someone, Anna said, command. Evans looked at her sharply. You mean our command? She nodded once. They want Orion active again for data, leverage, deniability. They just needed someone to finish it, someone who already knew how. Why not tell you? She gave a humorless smile, because they thought I'd say no. They followed the main line to a reinforced bunker at the valley's edge. The steel door was half buried in debris, the keypad still functional. Anna knelt beside it, wiped the dust away. Her fingers hesitated just above the numbers, old reflexes twitching awake. Sergeant, Evans asked quietly. She didn't look at him, stepped back. She typed 1079. The year her unit was formed. The keypad clicked green. The door opened. Inside, the bunker smelled of rust and electricity. Screens lined the walls, flickering faintly with green code. Every one of them bore the same header, Orion Reclamation Protocol. In the center stood a single console. On it, a monitor pulsed with a familiar message. Welcome back, Ghost 7. Evans whispered, they built all this for you. Anna stepped closer, her reflection glowing in the glass. No, she said softly, they built it for what they thought I was. She reached for the keyboard. The interface responded instantly, as if recognizing her touch. Lines of code scrolled faster, waiting. Behind her, Evans shifted nervously. Can you shut it down? Anna nodded faintly. Yes, but not from here. What do you mean? This is just a mirror node. The core is buried deep, under the relay grid near Bagram. So we go there. She shook her head. No time. Once this sync completes, Orion goes live again across every satellite it ever touched. Miller frowned. So how do we stop it? Anna's fingers hovered above the keys. We overload it. She began typing. Fast, precise. Her eyes tracked the code like a language she'd never truly forgotten. Evans watched the screens flash, red, then green, then red again. The hum in the bunker deepened, rising like a heartbeat. Sergeant, he said, what's happening? Systems fighting back, she muttered. Automated defense. It's rewriting every shutdown command. Can it win? She gave a thin smile. It already did once. Then she stopped typing. Stared at the final command prompt. Execute self-erase, Ghost 7 confirm YN. Evans read it over her shoulder. What's that? It's not just data, she said quietly. It's identity. Orion's archive is built around operator DNA markers, biometric traces. Mine's the core key. If I delete the system, I delete the record of me. Evans blinked. You mean? I mean I go back to being what I was supposed to be, dead. The silence pressed down heavy. Miller whispered, there has to be another way. There is. Evans shook his head. You can't just. I'm not dying, Anna interrupted. I'm letting go. The screens around them began to flash. A deep warning tone filled the room. Connection incoming. The line of code shifted again. A live feed request, encrypted under a single authorization tag. User, General MTHORNE. Evans blinked. The general's logging in. Anna's hands hovered. No, that's not possible. He doesn't even know this node exists. Then the monitor flickered, and Thorne's face appeared, ghost-like through static. Sharma, his voice came, broken through the feed. If you can hear this, listen to me. Command authorized this activation. They think Orion can be controlled again. They're wrong. You have to do what you think is right. The signal cut. Evans looked at her. He knows what you're about to do. Anna nodded slowly. Yeah, and he's giving me permission not to ask. She took a breath. Her hand hovered over the key. In her mind, she saw them all Vega laughing with a mouthful of sand. Ray's tuning his rifle, Morale's humming that stupid pop song before every mission. And herself, younger, angrier, believing survival was proof of purpose. It was. It was debt. She exhaled, stand back. Evan started to protest, but she gave him a look that stopped him cold. She pressed the key. The bunker roared to life, lights flaring, circuits screaming. The code cascaded down the screens like rainfall in reverse. System erasure initiated. The ground trembled, dust fell from the ceiling. Sergeant Evans shouted, "It's overloading." "I know," she yelled back, "that's the point." They ran. The four of them sprinted out of the bunker as a wave of heat followed, the night erupting in a burst of white fire that lit the valley like dawn. They dove behind the ridge as debris rained down. For a long moment, all they could hear was the wind, then silence. Real silence. When Evans finally opened his eyes, the bunker was gone. Only a smoking crater remained. "Sergeant," he called, coughing. Anna sat beside him, dust-covered, breathing hard but alive. Her eyes were open, calm. He let out a shaky laugh. "You're insane." "Probably," she murmured. Miller and Chun stumbled up the slope behind them, bruised but unhurt. They all stood there for a long time, watching the smoke rise. No more signals. No more ghosts. Evans turned to her. "It's done." She nodded. "It's done." "What happens now?" Anna looked out over the valley. The dawn was breaking again, soft, pale gold spreading across the sand. "Now," she said softly, "we go home." They returned to Razorback 2 days later. The base was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of diesel and dust. Thorne was waiting at the gate. When he saw her step down from the Humvee, relief flickered behind his eyes. "Report," he asked. Anna smiled faintly. "No system, no signals. Orion's gone." He nodded once, solemn. "Good." Then more quietly, "And you?" She thought for a long moment before answering. "Free," she said finally, "for the first time." Thorne looked at her, at the calm behind her eyes, the peace that hadn't been there before, and nodded slowly. "Then maybe," he said, "the system finally worked." She shook her head. "No, the people did." That night the base lights dimmed early. Most of the men slept. Anna sat outside the depot, dog tags in her hand. They were warm from her skin, faintly scratched, edges worn smooth from years of wear. She looked down at them, the engraved letters catching the starlight. Then slowly she unclasped the chain. She walked to the edge of the base, where the sand met the wind, and dropped them. The tags fell softly, half buried in dust, 2 small pieces of metal returning to the earth. Behind her, the base generator rumbled on. Life continued. Anna turned back toward the lights. For once, she didn't feel the weight of ghosts behind her. Only the quiet hum of survival, raw, imperfect, real. And as she walked, the words came to her, not loud, not spoken, but steady inside her chest. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.